Today, 112 years of precedent is up for debate by the Supreme Court as President Trump tries to exert control over the historically independent Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Here to discuss, a former member of that board, Sarah Bloom Raskin. She is also the former Deputy Treasury Secretary and a senior fellow in the Duke Center on Risk. It's good to see you, Sarah. Thanks for coming on the show. I think a lot of people don't really understand what the Fed is unless they're in the business. So can you tell folks, take us behind the curtain, what exactly does the Federal Reserve Board of Governors do?
Certainly. Well, and today is a big day because today was the day actually that independence was really up before the Supreme Court. But essentially, what the Federal Reserve was created to do was to conduct our nation's monetary policy, meaning the conditions in which credit is eased or tightened. And the way the Fed was asked to do this, was directed to do this by Congress, was to do it in a way that it would focus really on two very important things. First, on inflation, making sure inflation is under control, and maximizing employment. So the Fed typically has these two mandates. It does other things as well. It conducts, for example, bank supervision, bank regulation. It is the entity that is in charge of bailouts. So the Emergency Lending Authority is housed within the Fed. So an extremely important economic institution and one that really is the bedrock to market credibility.
So to your point at the top, why is it so important to continue the Fed's independence?
So the argument is, and it was an argument in full display at the Supreme Court today, is that the Fed needs to be independent because it is making decisions that are going to affect the long-term economic trajectory and credibility of our country. In particular, the role of monetary policy, the notion that interest rates are going to get established by the Board of Governors. And the fear here, and it's been borne out by quite a number of other countries that have sort of done this the wrong way, is essentially that presidents often like to juice the economy in such a way that interest rates come down, but inflation goes way up. And we saw this example in Turkey, for example, when Erdogan attempted to remove the central bank governor there in order to control what he wanted to say is monetary policy. And the inflation went through the roof. It was horrendous. It was extraordinarily difficult for that country to actually bring back a stable, credible economy. So the long-term consequences of a lack of independence are really quite severe.
So for people who haven't been following it, this is about Donald Trump's attempt to fire Lisa Cook, she has your job, what used to be your job. She was on the Fed board. And I want to play an interaction we heard between the Solicitor General and Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Take a listen.
We have amicus briefs from economists who tell us that if we grant you your stay, that it could trigger a recession. How should we think about the public interest in a case like this?
Yeah, two things to say about that. One is, if you look at what actually happened here, she was removed on August 25th, and the stock market went up for the next 3 days. So we've already had a kind of natural experiment, so to speak, about whether or not the predictions of doom will really be implemented. And surely that if investors are jittery or whatever the argument is, you would have seen that on August 25th, and you did not see that. In fact, you have these surprised.
Well, I'll interrupt you there to say that I don't want to be in the business of predicting exactly what the market's going to do.
I agree, and that's why I think the court ought to consider all those amicus briefs and their sort of, predictions of doom with a fairly jaundiced eye.
What do you make of that exchange?
So it's a typical short-term, long-term sort of fallacy, right? So what you hear the government arguing, they're arguing that, why should we be concerned about independence? Doesn't the stock market could actually go up in the short term. In fact, he points to an instance in which the stock market did go up on the day that this president fired Governor Cook, or attempted to fire Governor Cook. So, he's making the point that look, isn't this actually kind of good for the economy? Well, first of all, the stock market is not sort of a sole index as to how the overall economy is doing. Secondly, if you dissect what happened on that day, the stock market did go up, but it was driven primarily by tech-focused stocks, and query as to whether that had anything to do with any action of this particular president. And thirdly, I would point out, Chris, that what is really of concern is financial stability and credibility, not so much a recession in the short term or a downturn in the stock market, but whether the underlying fundamentals can actually operate credibly when the Fed is under the control of a president. And so the sort of the market concern here, and you hear a lot of expressions really of this concern, is that a market is not credible. It is not a stable, sustainable engine for economic growth if you have a central bank that is under the thumb of a president.
We only have 30 seconds left, but I have to ask you what you make of former Fed Chair Ben Bernanke and the current Fed Chair Jerome Powell both being there today for the arguments.
I think it's really quite significant. They were in essence the sort of the advertisements in the window saying the Fed must keep its independence. They were the symbols of that, both of them in the room. And so it was quite significant. You'll also maybe see that the Treasury Secretary did not want he did not want Jerome Powell in the room. And yet we also know that this president has brought a criminal investigation against Jerome Powell, and that, in fact, the Fed's independence is being challenged in other ways, in addition to this early shot at Governor Cook.
Sarah Bloom Raskin, so fantastic to have your expertise to add to our program. Thank you.